Welcome to our tour of the St. Joseph neighborhood, guided by Mary Beth Gannon. I'm Anita Drilling and your host from the Joliet Library. And I'm assisted by our IT person, Ivan Padilla, also from JPL. Please mute all of your microphones. And Mary Beth.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm assuming everyone can hear. If you have questions, let me know at the end. My name is Mary Beth Gannon. I'm a local historian and a member of the Joliet Historic Preservation Commission with the city. I'd like to start off dedicating tonight's talk to my cousin, Pat Butterback, who helped me with this. Okay, Sherry's saying she can faintly hear me. Can you try turning up? I'm gonna come closer to my computer. Okay.
Well, Mary Beth, can you please tell Sherry to turn up the volume on her computer?
Sherry, can you turn up?
And now it's all gone again.
All right, should we start over?
I think we should start over.
All right.
We're having some technical difficulties here too. So
okay.
We'll resume in 1 minute.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for waiting, everyone.
All right, Mary Beth?
Yes.
All right. Once again, welcome to our tour this evening of the St. Joe's neighborhood. Our tour is guided by Mary Beth Gannon. I'm Anita Drilling, your host from the Joliet Library, and with me tonight is Ivan Padilla, and he's going to be our IT person for the evening. If everyone could please mute your microphones, that would be super helpful. And Mary Beth, you're on.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another talk about Joliet's local history. This month, we're focusing on the St. Joseph's neighborhood. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a local historian and a member of the Joliet Historic Preservation Commission with the city. And I decided to tackle the St. Joseph's neighborhood. My late cousin's wife, Pat Butterback, I grew up hearing about Slovenian history from her, and I was always very interested in that culture. She suggested to me not that long ago, why don't you do a talk about our people, our neighborhood? And she gave me Georgie Nagnich's contact information, and Georgie was a huge, huge help. Let me come down to visit the museum recently. And tonight's talk is going to be an overview of the neighborhood. One thing I learned about Joliet Slovene culture is they've been keeping excellent records right from the beginning since they first arrived here. I can't think of any other ethnic group in our city that has the volume of records in detail and pretty much all in one place. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get into a lot of tiny details tonight. I'm hoping to revisit this in future talks, but this is a great talk for somebody who wants an introduction to this very rich and wonderful culture. So we're starting out with our first picture here. Hang on. And this is the present church. Okay.
Oops.
And here we are. You can go to the next slide. That's fine. And we think of St. Joe's as the great big church on Chicago Street with the huge spires, but this is the original church. So most of Joliet Slovenians can trace their roots to the southern regions of Slovenia. Their roots are in Carinthia, Carniola, and Styria. If I'm mispronouncing, please forgive me. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at one time. Their ancestors were very poor but hard workers. They were kind, devoted to their families, and devoted to their strong Catholic faith. Why did they come here? Like other immigrants, the Slovenians came here for jobs and opportunities, the American dream. Many of them initially working at American Steel and Wire Company, while others worked at the steel mill. The first known Slovenian to come to Joliet came here in 1861. It was not until the 1870s that many more Slovenians began arriving, but they faced discrimination. Joliet had only a few Catholic parishes at the time, including St. Patrick's and St. John's. St. Patrick's was dominated by the Irish, and they spoke English. While the Slovenes could speak German, they ended up going to St. John's. However, they were treated very poorly by the local Germans in Joliet. The Slovenes, when they had their mass, they never were made to feel welcome at that parish. So they went and had Anton Nemenich bring in a portable altar into the church, into St. John's every week, just so that they would have something of their own. With the influx of Slovenians coming to Joliet, some of the local Slovenians traveled to Chicago and asked the Archbishop to get them their own parish. Their request was approved, and within just 5 months, the Slovenians had their own church. It's hard to imagine today that a church could be built that fast, but that is how hard they worked to make their dream a reality. The original church was where the current rectory now stands. Let me look at my pictures here. Okay, can we advance to the next one? Okay, that's Father Sustersic. He's the first pastor of the parish, and I'll talk about him in a moment. Let's see. Local Slovenian businessman Marcus Kraker donated stone from his quarry for the church. We'll get into more detail about Marcus Kraker in a little bit. Also, as we talk later on, we'll see that the size of this parish was quickly eclipsed by the growing Slovenian community in Joliet. By 1913, 10% of Joliet was Slovenian. In May of 1891, the Slovenian people finally had a Slovenian priest. Cardinal Mundelheim brought them Father Sustersic. Father Sustersic was born in Slovenia in a village of Vic in 1861, and he became a priest in 1886. Sustersic became part of the St. Joseph Parish in May 1891. And as I said, the first church was but where the rectory now stands. It was a simple yet beautiful structure of Joliet limestone. The lay founders of St. Joseph Parish were John Zupancic, Steve Stanfel, Peter Rogina, John Medish, Jacob Caesar, Steve Skrinar, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Anton Golovish. Okay, Father Sustersic organized other Slovenian parishes, including those in LaSalle, Chicago, Waukegan, Springfield, and Indianapolis. He also visited Slovenian communities throughout America. He did quite a bit and lived a very short life. He was only 47 years old when he came down with tuberculosis in 1910, and he died the following year in Slovenia. So we go to the next slide. And this is a look at the new church, 1904, and then the old church next to it. Kind of interesting to see them side by side. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about the building of the new church. As I mentioned before, with more and more Slovenians settling in Joliet, the church quickly became crowded. The Slovenian community wanted to show the people of Joliet that they had good intentions by building a new church. Not just a new church, but a work of art. Groundwork for the current church began in 1904. It was constructed of buff Indiana Bedford limestone. The architect was W.J. Brinkman, and Adam Groth was the contractor. Okay, next slide. And here we are. You can see the beautiful rose-shaped window in the center and the entrance. Next slide. This is a postcard I saw at the Slovenian Heritage Museum. I thought was kind of interesting. It shows the current church. We've got the convent on the left and the rectory on the right and the school. And the bottom left is the parish hall. Next slide. Okay, this is a picture of the altar in earlier days. I got this from one of the many books written on the parish history that are all available at our library in downtown Joliet in the local history section on the second floor. I think there's about 4 or 5 different books. Next slide. Okay, and here's a nice black and white photo of the current rectory. Next slide. And here's a color picture I took a few days ago of it. It doesn't look that much different. Still in great shape, brick and 4 square in style. Next slide. Okay, and the convent. A nice little grotto with Mary there. Next slide. And we are going to talk about another priest at St. Joseph's, Reverend Matthias Butala. Reverend Matthias Butala was born in Joliet on Scott Street in 1898. He was a member of the first graduating class of St. Joseph's School in 1910. He was ordained in 1921 and began working at the parish as an assistant that same year. Butala remained at St. Joe's for about 9 years before being transferred to another parish. He eventually did come back to St. Joe's. And he was involved in many, many projects with the parish, including the Joliet Diocesan Thanksgiving Clothing Drive. In addition to helping local families, Butala also helped displaced Slovenians affected by the war. I am told that Father Butala was a great baseball player and could have easily been a professional player, but he chose a higher calling instead, the priesthood. Let's go to our next slide. Okay, these are from his Silver Jubilee. I got these great photos from one of the parish books. Next slide. This is a street shot again from his Silver Jubilee. Next slide. Okay, so one of his great accomplishments was what you're looking at now, St. Joe's Park. You know, the place to be every summer. Every parish having their picnic there. Lots of fun. Let me minimize this. Okay. So as I said, one of his greatest successes is St. Joseph's Park. Work on the parish park began in March 1939, and the auxiliary bishop of Chicago blessed the grounds in July of that year. The park hall was constructed in 1940, but was destroyed only a year later by a cyclone. Fortunately, the park was insured. The money allowed for the hall to be rebuilt and better with many more things there. In addition to the hall, the park included bocce ball alleys, tennis courts, basketball courts, a playground, and later a baseball diamond. We can go to the next slide. And here we are, we're looking at the baseball diamond, popular spot if you got a little boy who plays ball. Next slide. Okay, pretty big deal here. Babe Ruth came to St. Joe's Park in 1940. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'll talk about them in a moment. Let's see. Father Butala also organized the Parish Men's Baseball League, St. Joe's Boys Baseball, and we're going to talk about these ladies here. Hang on, I'll go to their picture. Okay, this was a popularity contest held at St. Joe's Park for the parish picnic. In the picture, we have Marie Russ of Summit Street on the left, and the other contestant is Dorothy Suadolk of Robb Street. Let's see, Frank. Says Frank Wiedek is general chairman of the outing, which is being sponsored by the United Slovenian Societies of Joliet. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, and there's their names, like I said before. And the next one. I found this one recently for New Slovenian Clubhouse on Clement Street, but that's the current address of the Croatian club, I believe. I'm kind of hoping somebody will help me figure out that one. I found that one kind of last minute, but I wanted to include it. Next slide. Okay, St. Joseph School. We'll talk about the school here. St. Joseph Parish opened its first school in October of 1895. 64 students were enrolled when the school opened. School was so popular that a second story was added to the building. There were so many students that they had to have classes in neighboring homes. After the current church was built in 1904, school was then taught in the old church. The new school, which you're looking at the picture of now, was opened in 1914. The school was named Ferdinand Hall. We can go to the next slide. And of course, it was named after Sister Ferdinand. She was the first teacher at St. Joseph's School, and she worked there for 39 years. Next slide. Okay. This is a group of young people, some of them students from St. Joseph's School. And it's a photo taken in the 1940s. The kids are celebrating the sale of $436,000 in war bonds. Amazing. Pictured are Robert Zlogar, Herman Trop, Margaret Malacher, Robert Jurisic, Margaret Kodrick, Joseph Gordon, Betty Lilick. 415 students from St. Joseph's School helped in this effort, along with KSKJ and the St. Cyril Methodius Lodge and the Slovenian Women's Union. We can go to the next slide. All right, this is a neat little clipping I got out of one of the St. Joseph Parish history books. It's the Dramatic Club officers. Who've got Marge Dolenshek, Agnes Vidmar, Olga Aryavic, Raymond Mutz, Anthony Vidmar, and John Nemenich. Next slide. This is another clipping I have from a play that was done through the parish. Parish was very active with singing and plays. If you recognize someone in there or might, I will have my contact info at the end. I do have the clipping with the names, and I'll try and get it to you. The next one. Okay, and this is Sodality, members of the Sodality doing a 3-act play. We see here Ray Jurisic, Carol Pruss, and Louise Vidmar. Next slide. Okay, this is the Sodality group from the parish. The lady on the right is my close friend, Lisa Cedar's mom, Shirley Kozlarek Cedar. I found that one kind of neat. I sent it to her. Next one. Okay, we have officers of the Blessed Virgin Mary Sodality. And you can see some of the names on here, the last names. We've got Klepik, Umik, Vidmar, Gregorich, Dolenshek, Kalsik, Ambrosich, Cernetich, Butala, Georgievich, and Mutz. Next one. Okay, and here's another clipping I got from the paper. Let's see, this is the Blessed Virgin Mary Sodality of St. Joseph's Church, celebrating its 40th anniversary. with Marie Klepek, Agnes Vidmar, and Frances Krall. Next slide. Oh, yeah, this is mine. My late mom, Judy Gannon, was an antiques dealer, and she would buy Joliet things whenever she could and hung on to them. And this is one of her things I took from her after she passed. It's a mirror, and it's a image of the Ruby Street Bridge opening in 1935. If you'd stay on that for a moment, I'm going to talk to you about the history of that bridge. You know, let's see. That bridge is the entryway to the neighborhood. On a hot July day in 1935, 10,000 people showed up to officially unveil the Ruby Street Bridge. People cheered and whistled for the event. A government boat named Whitman was the first watercraft to pass by with the new bridge. Mary Beth King cut the ribbon for the event. Lieutenant Governor Donovan was there for the festivities, as was Mayor Jones and Reverend John Plevnik of St. Joseph's Church. Father Plevnik gave a blessing for the bridge. There was also a parade that went from Central School to over the bridge going west. It was hoped that the completion of the bridge would usher in greater unity in the United States. Now, if we go to the next slide. So here we are celebrating the opening. I think this is American Coal. I can't see on the bottom. This is a little premiere opening the bridge for tomorrow, which was the day before. Okay, next one. All right, Johnson Oil put an ad in, Johnson Oil Refinery, celebrating the bridge opening. Here's another one. And Pioneer Service Stations, celebrating the opening of the Ruby Street Bridge, July 20th, 1935. All right, next slide. Okay, this is the Simon Satina building. Go to my notes on him. This building is named after Simon Satina, who was born in the village of, oh boy, I hope I say this one right, Dolnice, Slovenia, D-O-L-N-I-C-E. Like his father, Simon was a stonemason. Simon traveled as a stonemason, working in various parts of Slovenia and Austria before coming to America. He initially went to Cleveland, which also has a very large Slovenian population. He later went to Vermont, Chicago, and Aurora, and eventually came here to Joliet in 1899. Satina was billed as the only independent Slovene stonemason in Joliet. He married Marie Lieben from St. Vid, Slovenia. Satina's prices were said to be moderate, and he was highly recommended. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is a wedding photo of Anton Nemenich. That's probably one of the biggest names you'll hear in the Joliet Slovene community. Anton Nemenich was born October 6th in, let's see, I forgot to put the year in, sorry. Lokvica, Crane, Slovenia. He came to America in the 1880s and married Mary Frances Nemenich in 1887. They had 13 children. Anton came to Joliet in 1891 and opened a butcher shop on Bluff Street. A few years later, he opened a saloon as well as a funeral home. But he didn't stop there. Nemenich also had a horse stable, the Slovene Savings and Loan, the Joliet Slovene Bottling and Slovene Liquor. The Nemenich block building is still standing today. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so you've got your Nemenich block building still there. And go to the next slide. Okay, and here's a look at how it was. Nice black and white photo from the time. Next one. And I meant to mention in that previous slide that, you know, the turret was still showing. The turret's gone today, unfortunately. Here we are with Joliet Slovenic Bottling Company. I still see part of the building there with the bay window here. You can tell it's the same. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and we've got some more of Anton's business here. And the next one. This is pretty cool if you collect old bottles or this is your heritage, either way. Pretty neat thing. This is an antique bottle from Slovenian National Bottling Company, which was the Nemenich business. Next slide. Okay, we are on to the Golubish, but hang on, I'm going to say another quick thing about Mr. Nemenich. So just stay put there for a minute.
Okay.
I wanted to mention that Anton Nemenich was known for helping newly arrived Slovenian immigrants. He would buy them clothes. He allowed them to live above his building just to get settled. He also served several times as Joliet city alderman. There's still many Nemenich descendants in Joliet, in the Joliet area to this day. Now we're going to move on to the Golubish family. At the corner of Jackson Chicago Street is Baron's Den, owned by Tony Golubish. But here we are, we're looking at their first venture. Hang on. Go back to my slides. Okay, this is their first store. And go to the next one. Okay, here we are, Baron's Den. Like I said, Baron's Den is owned by Tony Golubish. Tony became a barber in 1963. His ancestor, named Anton Golubish, was born in Slovenia in 1864 and came to America in 1886. Anton married Mary Erzin and had a store originally on Chicago Street and then later on Jackson. He sold a wide variety of items, including groceries, confectionaries, coal. The family also had a saloon and a service station at one time. Okay, next slide. Okay, Tzak family, we know today for several generations. This is a vintage photo of John Tzak and the S. Markowitz embalming business. The Tzak family has been in the funeral home business since 1908. That's about 4 generations. Their business started near St. Joseph Church, and they also had a floral business. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, you can see that the name's still on the building. They've since built a larger, newer facility on Plainfield Road. Okay, the next slide. And speaking of Tzak family, I'm going to show you a picture here of Theresa Tzak Papish's doll collection. My late mom was friends with Mrs. Papish, and we visited her often when I was growing up. Theresa was born in 1904 in Rockdale to Martin and Mary Beth Tzak. She married a Papish. Her husband's family had a grocery store on Hickory Street. I got to know Mrs. Papish through her love of old dolls. Mrs. Papish was a highly skilled seamstress. People throughout Joliet in the 1940s, 50s, 60s would hire Mrs. Papish to make wardrobes of very intricate doll clothing for their children at Christmas time. It was better than anything you could buy in a store. She'd sew for Barbie dolls. She used to sew for Ma'am Alexander dolls, Tony dolls, Ginny dolls, and Shirley Temple. She made everything. I still have some of her patterns in some of her handmade doll clothing. This is a photo of her granddaughter with a display of her dolls. You can go to the next slide. And we got this match safe from her many years ago, maybe 40 years ago. And this was from her husband's family. They had a grocery store at the corner of Hickory and Granite Streets. And if you go to next slide, this is an ad I found not too long ago for their business. I like looking at the prices here. Pretty good deals. Specialty and quality meats, and sounds like really nice produce too. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Notes on this one. Okay, this is 560 North Chicago Street, formerly 1108 North Chicago. In my 1938 directory, I should explain for those who don't know, the 1938 directory is kind of the holy grail of Joliet city directories. The city of Joliet decided to renumber pretty much every street and almost every block in 1937. And they started with, I'm sorry, I got distracted. They started in 1937 and went through 1938. If you have the 1938 directory, it will show the old addresses as well as the new address. You really need to have both to look up anything old. Anyway, back to the Kolodovich family that had the property. That's who I'm finding there in 1938 and in previous years. Andrew, Anna, Peter, and Thomas lived there. Andrew was department manager at the Eagle. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, George Stonich. Stonich is another name you will often hear about town. And here we are. George Stonich was a storekeeper before the Slovene parish was founded. In a old clipping I found, it says that in his store you could purchase clothes, shoes, hats, a complete man's outfit, and he was highly recommended. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and of course today it's the Slovenian Women's Heritage Museum. Funny little story about this. There used to be an antique shop next to it in the 70s and early 80s. The building burnt down, I believe, maybe 25, 30 years ago. But anyway, my mom and I would often go to the antique shop next door, as my mom knew the people owned it, and we'd visit. And one day I noticed the museum. I was about 13 years old and it just opened. And I said, Mom, I want to go to this museum. And my mom said, she said, but that's not our history. You know, we're Irish, we're not Slovenian. I said, I don't care. It's beautiful. I want to see it. So I made her take me and I loved it. I just thought it was fabulous. So as I mentioned, this is the Heritage and Cultural Museum. It was founded by Irene Odorizzi. The Slovenian Women's Union acquired the building in the 1970s. At that time, it looked like a very stark office, but it was soon transformed into a capsule of Slovenian culture and history with racks of photos, antique clothing, lace, other textiles. They even have an entire room dedicated to periodicals on Slovenian history. Let's take a couple looks here at the next few slides. Okay, so yeah, here's black and white. This is when it was dedicated and before it became the museum, 1977. Let's go to the next one. And this is Irene Odorizzi. I mentioned before, she got this going. And the next slide. Okay, and we are going to talk about the Aryavic Sisters, and three sisters here in their beautiful cadet drill outfits. That was one thing that was very popular for many years through the Slovenian community was drill team cadets. We have Olga on the left, who was born in 1921, and she married Edward Ansel. They had 6 children. She was active with drill team from 1938 to 1953. We have Mildred on the right, who was born in 1923 and married to Rudolph Pucel. They had 4 sons. Mildred was very active in the Slovenian Women's Union, and she was also a teacher at St. Joseph's School. And the little girl in the middle is Janita Aryavic Ruth. I'm told she now lives in Florida. Okay. Oh, I see somebody said that's their mom. That's really nice. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, and your aunts. Yes, yes. Okay, this is, like I said, the museum, if you can go to the Heritage Museum, I think everyone should go there. I don't care what your ethnic background is. It's just wonderful to see. It's very special. When I went there almost 2 weeks ago, they have racks of photos and you can just flip through them and see so many cadet pictures. Sorry, I don't have the year for this particular one. Let's go to the next one. Okay, here we are, branch 20, and this is from 1949. Look at their costumes. They're just wonderful. Their uniforms are wonderful. Let's see the next one. Okay, we've got Jonita Aryavic in this one too, and we've got Irene Planasek, Bertha Hervaten, Jean Makovic, Margaret Malacher, Bernadine, oh boy, I'm not sure please excuse me for not pronouncing anything correctly. Anyway, let's go on to another one. All right, here we are, branch 20 again at the National Convention, 1952 in Detroit. Let's see, we've got Elaine Trop, Jerry Kubinski, Bernice Nemenich, Olga Aryavic, Irene Planensek, Mildred Aryavic, Doris Kroll, Arlene Paris, Rita Stukel, Theresa Miklik, Helen Verbiser, Jane Hankovic, Joan Popik, Jean Gombeck, Janita Aryavic. We have one of the Brolks, Dorothy Govednik, and Dorothy and Dolores Bostancic, sorry. Next slide. Okay, this is another photo I got from the rack at the museum. We've got Father David Stalzer and Ralph Papish. Looks like they're grinding grapes for Slovenian Heritage Day. Looks like fun. Let's go to the next one. Okay, as I said, they have an entire room. This is just like a couple little bookcases there. I was amazed. It looks like a real library in there. And all Slovenian history. Let's go to the next one. Okay, and now we're talking about Zarya, which means the dawn. Zarya magazine, or The Dawn, first came out in 1929. It was geared towards Slovenian women, and it served as a teaching tool, and it included recipes, crafts, all sorts of information. It was also a way for Slovenian women across America to keep in touch. The magazine promotes culture, tradition, and scholarship. Let's go to the next one. This is just a quick peek inside Zarya. See what's happening there. And I imagine there's probably a lot of photos of Joliet Slovenian women in there if you start looking at some of the bound issues. Maybe articles written by them too. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about Slovenian lace called Sipka. Let's hope I'm pronouncing that right. Look at all these bobbins. Could you imagine? I think I would go blind trying to make that lace. But That's how much work it required just to make one little piece. Look at all of those. Amazing. And you can see these bobbins at the museum. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's some of that work. It looks like a snowflake. And just look how perfect it is. I'd be afraid to touch it. It's just exquisite. The next one. Here's another piece of their Civic lace handiwork. And the next one. Okay, this is Lillian Brawl. She and her sister were artists. You can see a lot of their work at the museum. Now, see the next slide. Okay, this is Georgie Nagnich, and she is holding what I believe is called an abka. It's a type of Slovenian bonnet. Again, very delicate, colorful, and intricate. And the photos behind her at the museum are couples. Some of them are Slovenians who settled in LaSalle. Let's go to the next slide. And this is just a wide shot of the museum. Again, we're seeing the lace, the bobbins, and some of the dolls that were dressed for Grape Festival. The next slide. Okay, and then we've got some squeeze boxes here, I believe. Button boxes, yeah, button boxes. And these were donated by different Slovenian families in the area. And go to the next slide. All right, let me pull up my notes. Okay, 512 North Chicago Street, built roughly 1890 with limestone foundation. This home was originally numbered 1008 North Chicago Street. This is the Beastry home, owned by Frank Beastry, who lived there with William Beastry in the 1890s. William was a nail maker. And as you'll see throughout the neighborhood, Slovenians would take in men as they came over from the old country and would let them have a room in their home. So some of the other people who stayed at this house over the years, but didn't necessarily own it, were Podner, Mikula, and Molnar. Those were some of the surnames I found there. We'll go to the next slide. We've got 514 North Chicago Street, also built in 1890. It rests on a limestone foundation. It is similar in style, possibly by the same architect. The house was originally numbered 1010 North Chicago Street. Frank Papish, who was a laborer, lived at the home in the 1890s. The Grabas family also lived there in the 1890s. In later years, the Brozovic, Georgievich, and Tizek families lived in the home. Let's go to our next slide. Okay, I meant to skip, let's skip that one. I didn't have time to work on that one. Okay, and we are at 508 North Chicago Street, formerly 1004 North Chicago Street. This is the first KSKJ building in Joliet. KSKJ, or Grand Carniolian Slovenian Catholic Union. It was a fraternal organization for Slovenians in America. One of its organizers was Father Sustersic, who we talked about earlier. Let's go to the next slide. This is a look at the building today. Like the church and the school, the size was quickly outgrown by the influx of Slovenians moving to Joliet, so they needed larger facilities. Let's go to the next slide. So go a little further on Chicago Street, over by the county building, and we've got the other KSKJ. KSKJ Life was founded in the 1890s and was born out of a growing need to help Slovenians who had dangerous work at the steel mills. To this day, KSKJ offers life insurance and retirement solutions. KSKJ has since moved again and is now located on Glenwood Avenue. Let's go to the next slide. And here's a look at St. Joseph's Civic Association officers. We've got Frank Wiedek, Antoinette Wiedek, Mary Golubish, Catherine Przybylski, Anton Pazdertz, Frank Branicher, Reverend Butala, Reverend Sipon, and Frank Pierce. Okay, next slide. Okay, this was one I was still working on the history of. We can skip this one for now. Okay, I think most of you probably know what this is, but for those of you who don't, we are looking at the very first, world's first Dairy Queen store. Yes, it happened right here in Joliet, 501 North Chicago Street. The soft serve formula was developed by John McCullough, a friend of Sherb Noble's. Sherb Noble opened this store here. The DQ was only at this location for about 10 years, but if you're really craving that dilly bar, you can, of course, go to Jefferson Street near Larkin and get your fix. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's a black and white view of what it looked like in the day. And the next slide. Okay, this is one I was looking on and didn't get a whole lot of information on. Let's skip that one. Okay, everybody's favorite, even though it's long gone. Stefniches. Look at those beautiful Clydesdale horses. Another big part of the St. Joseph neighborhood is Stefnich's restaurant. Although it's changed hands, the sumptuous smells of fried chicken and shrimp, Slovenian spaghetti, still linger in many a mind. John and Anna Stefnich began serving the famous chicken dinners in 1933. Their first customers were steel plant and brewery workers, city workers, and police officers. But word got out quickly to the rest of town. Let's look at another photo. Next slide. Okay, yeah, here's a look at it today. And because of the restaurant's proximity to the Ralto, many stars dined there too over the years, including Mitzi Gaynor, Frankie Yankovic, Victor Borge, and the Letterman. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a picture of Christy Stefnich Kuzma with the famous food. I got this photo from my good friend Linda Weiss, who used to work at Stefnich's a long time ago. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I'm sorry. Go to the next one, I'm sorry. Oh no, back, I'm sorry. Go back to. There we go, okay. I had these out of order, I apologize. So on the bottom right is my friend Linda Weiss. She thinks this photo is from 1981 maybe. And that's when she was working there. She was just a teenager. Let's go to the next one. And there we are. Here's Christy Stefnich Kuzma with the famous food. Look at those fries. Yum, yum. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Ah, yes, I put in the recipe. Here we are. What I'm told is the recipe. I've actually tried this, and I think it tastes like it. You have to dredge your chicken in egg, flour, cracker meal, not cornmeal. Has to be cracker meal. Salt and pepper it. You fry it in a stovetop pan with vegetable oil. But, and you knew there was a but coming. To get that really good taste, you have to have a very deep pan, preferably a cast iron pan. When I tried making this, I used a 4-inch deep glass Pyrex baking dish, and I filled it almost to the brim with vegetable oil, and I popped it in the oven instead of doing it on top of the stove. And I thought it tasted the same, but putting it in the oven took a really long time. So whatever you do, it's not meant for a deep fryer. So either get a really heavy old cast iron pan, put it on top of the stove, or you can try like me and put it in the oven, but it has to have a lot of depth to it. It can't be a shallow pan, and you need a lot of oil. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, another part of Scott Street here are the Slovenian Murals. They're titled From Slovenia to America. There are 10 of them in the series, showing the journey from the 19th century up through World War II. The first 4 murals show life in 19th century Slovenia. We can go forward a little. The next slide. Okay, yeah, this is slide 1 and 2. This is the second one. It looks like a couple maybe getting married. Next slide. Here we are with the harvest. And the next slide. Okay, so now this, I believe, is either slide, this slide is mural number 5 or 6. This is when they're leaving their homeland for America. Okay, the next one. Okay, and that's him arriving in America, arriving in Joliet. So here we are arriving in Joliet. The next slide, showing the Slovenian men working in the mills. I don't think I have the 8th slide. That shows the Slovenian women working in the home. Let's go to the next one. Okay, this is mural 9. And this is Slovenian children. You can see them by their school, and you can see the mills in the background. They're adjusting to American life. So they're acclimating. Let's go to the next one. So yes, again, we're right about World War II, and the children are getting used to American life. But as we know about the Slovenian community, they still hang on to their culture, thank goodness. So they still have all their history. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, another part of this neighborhood I need to mention is the original St. George Serbian Orthodox Church. This one's been closed for quite a while. The members of that church have since opened another facility, another building off of Stryker. So let's go to the next one. Okay, Gates painting. Let's see if I put that one in here. Okay, 564 North Chicago Street. It was formerly numbered 1110 North Chicago Street. It's currently home to Mr. Gates Painting and Home Rehab. Building's kind of an enigma to me. I'm still trying to identify the original business that would have been on the first floor. I know United Liquor and Beverage was there, but I'm trying to go back further. I'm having much better luck finding out who lived upstairs than who had business downstairs. Some of the tenants who lived upstairs have last names you will likely recognize, including Muich, Tomac, Pleasy, Bibar, Stimac, Radakovich, Sturl, and Minerich. Let's go to the next one. Okay, skip that one and that one. Thought I pulled those. Okay, now we are looking at the Kozlarek-Wiedek wedding photo. This is a wedding photo of my friend Lisa Cedar Dorenz's grandparents, Justine Wiedek and Anton Kozlarek. They lived on Robb Street. And in the 1980s, I remember visiting Mrs. Kozlarek when I was in junior high. She was a very active member of St. Joseph Church. You can go to the next slide. Okay, here's Wiedek children. They're right by the wire company here playing outside. Not sure which one is which, but I know they're Wiedeks. Let's go to the next one. And this is Anton and Justine Kozlarek renewing their vows. I think this is from 1977, and this is Father Stalzer, I believe, inside St. Joseph Church. Let's go to the next one. And as I mentioned, Mrs. Kozlarek was very active with the women's organizations at St. Joe's. You see my friend there, Lisa, she's probably about 2 or 3 years old at the time there, sitting with her grandma. And next slide. And we have another Slovenian women's get-together. Mrs. Kozlarek would often host them at her home. And I got these photos from Lisa. Let's go to the next slide. And this is Lisa's wedding in 1991, October 1991, to Phil Dorenz, and she had her ceremony at St. Joe's. Very elaborate, very beautiful wedding, and great reception at Wilbur Ballroom, which unfortunately is gone now. Let's go to the next one. Okay, I was hoping to get a picture of Joseph Sitar, but have not had any luck. However, this was his home, and it was the home is still there. It's on Hickory Street. Joseph Sitar was born in the village of Toplis in the Lower Carniola of Slovenia. He came to America in 1896 and ended up in Joliet in 1902, where he already had some family in the area. Joseph's brother Carl worked for the Golubish family. Joseph opened a grocery store and butcher shop with the help of his other brothers, Charles and Anton. Their first store was on Jackson Street, and then later Chicago Street under the name Ogulin and Sitar for Janko or Yanko Ogulin. Joseph Sitar was reportedly a great tenor singer who was very active in St. Joseph Church Chorus. He was also the first vice president of KSKJ. In 1908, he married Frances Predovic from Pueblo, Colorado. They set up a house at 511 North Hickory, which is what we're seeing. Now, if we go to the next slide, we'll see some of their family. Here we are. These are the Sitar twins. Let's see, Bernarda and Genevieve. And I have more to this particular picture. I have an article that goes with it. The twins had perfect grades. They had the exact same grades, and they were A students. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and here's Zora Sitar. Wasn't she beautiful? My friend Zora is named after her. This would have been her great aunt, I believe. Anyway, Zora Sitar went on to marry William Joyce of Joyce Byling. She was the first Mrs. Joyce. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is a pajama, pajama party. It looks like it is from the early 1930s. And I'm wondering if anybody recognizes the woman in the first row, second from the right. She's a name that we still talk about today. We always wonder what happened to her. Molly Zelko. This is her before her hard-hitting reporter days. Let's talk about her. My notes. Amelia Molly Zelko was born in Joliet in 1911 to Frank and Johanna Kos Zelko. This photo I like of Molly, it's before she went to help run the Spectator. It shows her in a more innocent time. When Molly went to work at the Spectator in 1936, along with her boss, William McCabe, the paper was highly detailed with hard news, but also an amazing source for features and society news. You can look at the Spectator on microfilm at the library on the second floor in Joliet. Great source. Anyway, Molly, as most of us know, routinely exposed corruption in town, whether it was about politicians or the outfit or a combination of the two. The exposure likely cost Molly her life. Let's go to the next photo. Next slide. Okay, here we are, Molly at her desk. You know, happier times. Let's go to the next one. And this is the headline from The Spectator. I got the library from October 1957. Molly Zelko probe pushed. Let's go to the next one. And this is where she lived. She lived on Buell Avenue in the first block in the cul-de-sac right by Center and Western. Let's see. Let's see. On September 26, 1957, a man walking down Buell Avenue found a woman's shoe just after midnight. The next morning, the other shoe was found on a nearby lawn. The shoes belonged to Molly, who'd been wearing them the previous day. Molly always said if she ever got into trouble, she would kick her shoes off. Her disappearance drew the attention of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and of Robert F. Kennedy. Lonnie Kane and the late John Whiteside did a great series of articles in the 1970s about Molly's disappearance. And last year, there was a podcast series with the Joliet Area Historical Museum. I believe you can get that online. Over the years, there's been much speculation about where Molly is. Was she buried on Stryker or somewhere else? And there are those who are more optimistic and like to think maybe she went into witness protection. We still wonder where she is. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, and I meant to skip that one and put that at the beginning. I think might be at the end here or close to it. Go to the next one. Oh, okay, no, we're not. We've got Craker. Okay, bear with me. Marcus Craker. Earlier I mentioned Marcus Craker giving stone from his quarry to help build the first St. Joseph Church in Joliet. Craker was born in 1839 in Liebeck, Slovenia. At 18, he journeyed to America with his brother Joseph. When Marcus arrived here, he was penniless, but he quickly began working and, more importantly, saving. In 1861, he married Jacobina Georges in Joliet and settled here, having 12 children. Jacob Craker and his brother Marcus had many business adventures, including a shoe and boot store, a cigar business, the Joliet Quarry Company, as well as many other quarries in other areas. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is the famous Craker Mansion. And it's probably one of the few homes in Joliet that I've always wanted to go in. It's built by F.S. Allen. It's beautiful brownstone. It has a third floor ballroom, which is necessary to truly call a old home a mansion. You gotta have that third floor in the ballroom. Let's go to the next slide. This is a dresser that used to be in the Craker Mansion. It has, I have a matching one to go with it too. It has a marble top. These are gilded bronze ornaments on the side of the dresser and on the front of it that came out of the Craker Mansion. And like I said about Mr. Craker, in addition to the stone he gave to St. Joseph's Church, he donated stone for the building of St. Joseph's Hospital, the first one, and for St. John's Church. Mr. Craker's stone has been used to build Joliet Township High School. It was also used at the Rialto, the old Chicago Water Tower, and Mr. Craker also served as an alderman for the city of Joliet. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, Dr. Martin Iveck. Okay, Dr. Martin Iveck was the first Slovene physician in America. And he's right from here. You know, he was born in the village of Civic, Slovenia in 1878. He came to America in 1890 and visited his Uncle John Cracker in Minnesota. Once he was in Minnesota, he enrolled at St. John's University and became a teacher, then a bookkeeper, and then decided, hey, I want to be a doctor. Very smart man. He attended Rush Medical College and graduated in 1904. Dr. Iveck worked as a doctor here in Joliet, and he also worked in Chicago. Dr. Iveck was the Supreme Medical Examiner of the KSKJ from about 1904 to 1911, and then 1914 to 1917. Let's see. He was also medical examiner for the Society of St. Barbara for 3 years. In 1913, he was nominated the health commissioner in Rockdale. Dr. Iveck grew up very poor and never forgot his roots. He would treat poor patients free of charge. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Skip that one. Okay, here's another famous Jolietan here of Slovenian descent. It's Audrey Todder on the right, coming back to visit Joliet. Notes on Audrey. I believe that's a photo from the Spectator. Hang on. While Joliet has had its share of famous athletes, it's also had its share of famous actors and actresses, including screen siren Audrey Todder, who was of Slovenian descent. Audrey Mary Todder was born in 1917 to John and Ida Mae Todder. John was born in 1877 in a town in Slovenia I cannot pronounce, Griblje, Griblje. Her father came to Joliet in the early 1900s. Her mother was Swedish, I believe. I'm not sure if Audrey was raised in the St. Joseph parish. I saw in later years that she was Methodist, but that might have been after she married. I'm not sure. Audrey starred in several movies, including The Postman Always Rings Twice, Lady in the Lake, and The Saxon Charm. She married Dr. Leo Fred in 1952. He was the assistant dean of the UCLA School of Medicine. They have one child, a daughter. Audrey passed in 2013. I kind of like to think of Audrey as Joliet's Veronica Lake. Yeah, she's got the hair going there. Let's look at the next slide. And this is, I got from the Herald, and this is from the 60s. It was from a weekend supplement. And it's a photo of Audrey in later years with her daughter, and you can see the strong resemblance there. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and here we are, we're on the last one. So here's my name and my phone number. I'm old school. I love the landline. I hate cell phones. I have one, but I rarely use it. Best way to reach me, if you want me to research a family member or the history of a building or a house in town or something else, is to call me 815-740-1784. You can also email me. Oh, can you go back? You can email me, Mary Gannon, N-U, Mary, M-A-R-Y-G-A-N-N-O-N, and then an extra N for Northwestern and U for University @gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook as Mary Beth Gannon, or on my genealogy page, Joliet Irish Genealogy. I'm interested in all sorts of Joliet history, regardless of religion or ethnicity. I find it all very fascinating and would love to talk to some of you. And I appreciate you all coming tonight. Next month, for December, we're going to be looking at doing vintage Joliet Christmas. So if you've got home photos of your family, maybe from anywhere from the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, you know, I'm trying to make my cutoff at the 70s. I would love to see those photos and use them in my talk next month. I would like to show how people throughout town celebrated Christmas. So hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much. And thank you again to Anita and Ivan and to Georgie Nagnich and to Pat Butterbach. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for attending